February 5th, 2019. We're now going to close the executive session and reconvene the public meeting. The purpose of the executive session was to discuss personnel pursuant to RCW 42.30.110. No action was taken by the commission during the executive session. I'd like to take a roll call. Commissioner Bell?
Here.
Commissioner Shepard?
Here.
Commissioner Briscoe is here. I'd like to read our meeting schedules for the month of February here and into March. We have a Marina Advisory Committee on Tuesday, February 12th, 2019 at 6 p.m. here in the Commission Chambers, Harbor Center Building, 1801 Roeder Avenue, Bellingham. We have a TAC meeting, the Technical Airport Advisory Committee meeting, Thursday, March 14th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m. in the ARF conference room at 2005 West Bakerview Road, Bellingham International Airport. And we have the BIAC, which is the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee, Thursday, March 14th, 2019 at 5:30 p.m. in the ARF conference room at 2005 West Bakerview Road, Bellingham International Airport. So now we have a public comment period. I have one person signed up, Judith Aiken.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am a member of the Blue Green Waterfront Coalition. I have a couple comments for you. We have been committed to seeing that the development of the waterfront adhere to the highest environmental standards, while also seeing that the port and city adhere to the best building standards, using green building materials, and adhere to the best hiring labor practices. One thing to note, that the legislature is now engrossed in House Bill 1257, the Clean Buildings for Washington Act. If this bill is passed, and if final budgets include these funds, all ifs, it will allow owners of the multifamily housing buildings to apply for state grants to help finance energy efficiency investments. It will also set efficiency standards that large commercial buildings would have to meet, which might impact some of the buildings in the waterfront development area. Just for your information on that, if you haven't been abreast of that. And today I'd like to speak about the affordable housing on the waterfront. We all know that Harcourt is putting in the condos. And so we've been updated that we'd also like to see at the same time or near to the same time something being done about the affordable housing. The Ligman building property and the 3.5 acres of that land that is available for development could be used to create a multi-storied building suitable for some incubator employee-owned businesses as well as the affordable housing above. As a member of the coalition, I am very supportive of this idea, and so we'd like to see that probably being pushed forward on the port and development. However, I am concerned about the siting for these buildings and how near the railroad this would be. And if a tour could be arranged, I think our committee members would appreciate a first-hand view of the area. So thank you for those considerations. And I was walking around the port and I noticed, I don't know if they're how new they are, but all the signs explaining the vessels and where the development is, and it's really enhances a person's walk in the area. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. And those signs are a new project, just, I don't know, a couple months they've been here. So thanks for noticing.
Jim
Appreciate
Carl, who's sitting right next to, was instrumental in getting those installed.
it. And Judith, I'd be happy to reach out to you guys for setting up a time where we could go down and look at the site together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else here that didn't have a chance to sign up that would like to speak? Or forever hold your peace? What is, okay, move along to the consent agenda.
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through C.
Commissioner Bell, any questions?
No, I did have one on the modification lease, and I wanted already this was coming up. I just wanted to know what the purchase option looked like on that, and you answered my question, but I thought it'd be wise to have that on the record.
Thank you. Shirley McFerrin, Real Estate Director. This is a renewal for Teal Jones for the Sumas property. And earlier, Commissioner Bell asked me the question about their ability to acquire the property. And back in 2004, we gave them a right to purchase that property, and that right will run through July of 2019 of this year. And that purchase would be based on fair market value.
And at that
To that-
juncture, it expires, and do you anticipate that they'll want to renew that purchase option?
I'm guessing, but I would say that's highly unlikely because they are putting a lot of capital into improvements. So my guess is they'll put their capital into their business rather than acquiring the property, but I may be mistaken.
Thank you. That's my only question.
I don't have any further questions.
Okay, thank you.
No questions. Thank you, Shirley.
Is there a motion to approve consent agenda items A through C?
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Shepard?
Aye.
Aye as well. Passes 3-0.
Thank you. A motion to approve implementation agreement number 2 to the intergovernmental framework agreement between the Lummi Nation and the Port of Bellingham and increase the infrastructure division's operating budget by $120,000.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Gowron, Director of Environmental and Planning Services. I would rarely introduce an action item like this, but I truly can say that it's an honor today to present this particular one. This agreement referred to as Implementation Agreement Number 2. And the reason I say it that way is because it really represents, in my opinion, is a significant and very positive step forward in the relationship between the Port and the Lummi Nation. And we'll go into a little more detail on that, but in general, it's aimed to address some longstanding and, quite frankly, in my opinion, legitimate concerns that have been expressed over the years from both the Lummi Nation as well as the Port of Bellingham. And the overall intent of this agreement is to address the historic, as well as current and ongoing and future impacts to the tribal treaty rights from existing marine infrastructure that was built throughout Bellingham Bay as well as Drayton Harbor. And so I'll get into details on what this agreement particular goes through in a moment here. But before I do that, a little bit of history here. Obviously, the Lummi people have been a part of this community and this region for generations, utilizing the shorelines and the waters of Puget Sound and Sailor Sea since time immemorial. So the port is obviously a relatively newcomer, only been around for a century, comparatively established in 1920. So, but in that time frame, we have had a longstanding and a good working relationship with the Lummi Nation, going through projects and have a lot of common shared interests, but haven't always been on the same page, haven't always seen things from the same perspective, and have had some disagreements on how to approach things as well. But back in 2009, about 10 years ago, the Port and the Lummi Nation really started to work together to try to address that and change that dynamic and work on our collaborative relationship. And entered into what is referred to as an intergovernmental agreement, framework agreement. And I'll talk about these in a little more detail here in a moment, but that framework agreement was really established, the communication protocols, the overall goals of working together on how we could develop individual standalone implementation agreements. So the framework agreement was the communication protocols, and the implementation agreements are on a project-by-project or a case-by-case basis that are standalone agreements that also feed into that framework agreement. At the same time, we also entered into implementation agreement number 1. I'll talk about that as well in a moment. And then really since those obligations associated with that have been satisfied, we've been working in good faith for a number of years now, actually, on this agreement that's before you for consideration today. So the framework agreement, as I mentioned, really is what exactly that. It's a framework on how to work together to resolve past disagreements and jointly pursue future opportunities. It set forth some principles to guide the development of these individual implementation agreements, things like commitment to face-to-face meetings, working on transferring of technical information back and forth between staff, working on media and community outreach together, making sure we're on the same page on how to do all that. And then it also established a dispute resolution process. So if we weren't able to come to agreement on certain things, or if we just weren't able to get there, it also maps out a very specific application of a dispute resolution process. Luckily, we haven't had to implement that yet, and hopefully we never will, but it is lined out in that agreement. As I mentioned, we also entered into implementation agreement number 1 at the time. There was a number of details of that, and I'm just going to go highlight a few examples of what was included in that. In that agreement, the port had agreed to provide a one-time moorage credit to Lummi Fishing Fleet of $60,000 that could be used in either harbor. We also provided some funding of technical support for the Lummi Natural Resources staff to be able to provide expertise and opinions on specific projects that we were working on. And then we also had agreed to not use the Bellingham Bay PISDA, or Puget Sound Dredge Disposal Area disposal site that's located out in Bellingham Bay for any port projects. In exchange for that, along with a few other things, the Lummi Nation had agreed to support our Get NOAA campaign at the Bellingham Shipping Terminal, which was underway at that particular time. That was obviously not successful, but the shipping terminal's revving up anyways right now, so that's maybe a good thing. They also had agreed to not oppose some specific port projects that we were working on at that time, permits for projects such as the acquisition and placement of the Faithful Servant floating dry dock that's in that photo there at the Puglia shipyard. So the obligations associated with that agreement have all been satisfied. There's a few other things that were in there that either don't apply anymore or they've been satisfied. And so, like I said, we've been working on this implementation agreement number 2 then since that point. So to get into the details of what this agreement that today is, and just to back up one more time, as a reminder, so the overarching goal of this is really to provide a full and complete mitigation of all the impacts from the construction, use, repair, and maintenance of all the structural changes to the harbors and the Bellingham Bay and Drayton Harbor. So all the dredged areas, filled lands, bulkheads, pilings, everything that's existing today that the port owns and or operates, even things that we didn't necessarily create because they were done before we even existed as an entity, but are being used today by the port or port tenants. And then that in turn, this agreement supports the Lummi Nation's tribal treaty rights for access to and harvesting from their usual and custom fishing grounds for ceremonial, subsistence, and commercial fishing. So to accomplish that, the port has agreed, pending commission approval, this agreement agrees to provide the Lummi Fishing Fleet with a $120,000 annual moorage credit that can be used by Lummi Fishing Fleet in either the Blaine or Squalicum harbors. That's a credit that is renewed annually into perpetuity, as long as the port owns and or operates our marinas. That is a credit that does not roll over every year. If it's unused portion, it's renewed annually. And it's also indexed to our moorage rates now. So if our moorage rates increase by 3% or so, then the credit is increased by the same amount, so it retains that capacity even though moorage rates may change over time. In addition to that, the port is agreeing to cure or forgive up to $220,000, thank you, in past due charges in our marinas. Use of the boat launches, of port boat launches for no fee, as well as an agreement to work together on locating and salmon and shellfish enhancement facilities on port properties. The other element that we're working collaboratively on is working on some treaty rights, information sharing, handouts, things working with our boater community and others on tribal treaty rights. So those are the main elements from the port. The Lummi Nation then is agreeing to withdraw existing objections to permits that we have submitted for maintenance and repair projects throughout port facilities over the past few years. And they're agreeing not to oppose any future permits that are related to the maintenance and repair of existing marine facilities. That includes using those facilities, maintaining and repairing or replacing as needed. That though, would be caveated that that does not apply to the expansion of those facilities. So if there's a pier or a float and a piling needs to be replaced, that would fall under this agreement. But if we went to go expand that and build more piling or more overwater coverage that are not existing today, that would be dealt with on a separate, either a separate implementation agreement or on a case-by-case basis. Then additionally, it does not cover environmental contamination, so any contaminated sediments or cleanup projects that are addressing contamination. But if there's a historic structure that needs to be repaired or replaced as part of that environmental cleanup, that would be then an element of this agreement.
Brian, could you back up a slide?
Yeah.
For the salmon and shellfish facilities, what specifically does it say in the agreement that we're gonna do here?
It really says that we will, I could pull up the specific language, but it essentially says that we agree to work together to find locations on port property that could be utilized for salmon enhancement or shellfish enhancement facilities. Typically, things like net pens, other things like that that could be sited on port property. It doesn't say anything specifically about free of charge, I believe. I think that's just more like we will agree to work together to find locations that are suitable for those types of facilities.
What it says, Commissioner, is that locations within the port.
What it says, Commissioner, is the port will provide that Lummi may install salmon and shellfish enhancement facilities at locations within port facilities in Bellingham Bay and Drayton Harbor mutually agreed to by the port and Lummi Nation at no cost to the port in such a manner as will not interfere with port's operations as determined by the port.
Okay.
So at no cost to the port is what that was saying, yeah.
And an enhancement project, I see for a net pen or an upwell or something
Yeah.
for shellfish, a net pen could be a rearing facility
Yeah.
or something.
Right.
Or it could go as far as working together on a hatchery.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it was really open at this point. It was really just saying we wanted to acknowledge that that was an element that was something that we would work on together. And the scope and scale of that was to be determined.
Okay.
And mutually agreed to.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
So based on all of that, staff does recommend approval of this implementation agreement. Like I mentioned before, it really does represent a significant step forward in our relationship. All of our discussions to date, they were long and had a lot going on in those discussions, but the tone was really collaborative. The Lummi team actually referred to this as a clean slate approach. It really, if taken at its face and implemented the way it's intended, really is to address all of the historic impacts to the Lummi's UNA fishing tribal treaty rights from existing facilities, and that's a major step forward in the relationship. And then it also then provides the port with our long-term predictability and our ability to repair and maintain and replace our infrastructure, which is a big part of our economic development and a core mission. Then additionally, as you noted, the other recommended action is that the port amends the budget to provide a $120,000 infrastructure division budget item for that credit. It's also worth noting that the Lummi Nation LIBC, the Lummi Indian Business Council, did approve this agreement just today. So with the Commission's consideration and approval, this would be able to be executed immediately. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or Commission discussion.
Commissioner Bell?
Couldn't be more happy. And I just want to thank you for your patience and your diligence, and the entire staff, I think, for all of the input that has gone into this. This is not something that was just an easy fix. So thank you for the incredible attitude. And I will say, as a commissioner, I've learned a lot about the treaty, about the communications with the tribe. Happy to be a partner with them in this, and hope we can accomplish some great things going forward. But kudos to you. This doesn't happen without you and Rob and the rest of the staff and what you have done to make this happen. So my only comment is, what a blessing you are to the port. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Shepherd.
I too echo the huge amount of work and the years of time that has occurred in trying to reach this point. And I just want to acknowledge it's been a heavy lift for both parties. You know, both parties have had to come to the table and negotiate about challenging topics. I mean, for the port, it's mostly more in terms of finances. For the tribe, it's in terms of some very near and dear aspects of their identity and their framework of how their nation is organized. And I think we've both come together to put a good agreement forward that required compromise and tough choices on both parties. And I've continued to say that I'm thrilled to see this move forward, so we're able to move on to some more of the fun stuff. And Don and I were just out at Lummi Nation last week talking about some of that fun stuff, you know, meeting with our economic development team and their economic development team, and really looking at what are those big partnerships and those bigger collaborations we can work on together in the future. I would love to see our staff think about ways that we're able to celebrate the fishing fleet occupying Squalicum Harbor. It's no small consequence to have the largest tribal fishing fleet in the entire nation that's going to be primarily housed at Port of Bellingham facilities. It's a big presence. It's an important economic engine for the tribe, and it's a sign of good things to come. And I'd love for us to find some ways of celebrating that in terms of signage, more descriptive materials, artwork, and other things that are able to really celebrate that presence here. I think it's good for us, it's good for our relationship, and it's something people will recognize positively. And finally, let's make sure we have enough fish for a big fishing fleet to catch. Let's work on this hatchery project and make sure that we're doing the other things that are going to allow both tribal and non-tribal fishermen to be successful for a long time here.
Well, I'd echo what both my fellow commissioners have said, and I'd like to add a little bit. I think that one thing I'd like to do is I'd like to thank our past commissions who worked long and hard at trying to get this in place, and we've landed this, so to speak, but it's not all our glory, so to speak. There's a lot of sweat put in it by people that aren't here. I think we've turned a corner with the Lummi Nation, and I'm really glad to see that. We've reached a level of trust, I believe, between the port and the Lummi Nation and the people of Whatcom County that's going to be very good into the future. I think we've turned down a road finally where we can help each other and have very good outcomes for the future for both Lummi Nation and the people of Whatcom County. So I'm very, very glad that this has come to fruition. It's great. And I thank our counterparts at the Lummi Nation that worked very hard to make this happen also, as well as staff here at the Port of Bellingham and members of our Whatcom County community. So, Rob, do you anything you'd like to say?
No, you guys have said it all. We have a great relationship with the local Lummi tribe, and we're looking forward to some business dealings going forward. We're really looking forward to this hatchery project. I think that's next up on the docket with them. But this agreement will allow us to go through with some existing projects that have been waiting, so we're excited. And again, this is Brian's baby. He gets the credit.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it was definitely a team effort. It was really great to work with our counterparts at the Lummi Nation. They were really, really great to work with.
A motion to approve implementation agreement number 2 of the intergovernmental framework agreement between the Lummi Nation and the Port of Bellingham and increase the infrastructure division's operating budget by $120,000.
Mr. Bell, or Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Aye. Passes 3-0.
Commissioners?
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute an agreed order to perform remedial design for the required cleanup actions at the I&J Waterway site pending no substantive changes to the draft agreed order.
All right, me again. Thank you, Commissioners. This is one of an ongoing project that we've talked about for a while now, but it's ongoing next steps of ongoing work in the I&J Waterway Model Toxics Control Act, or MODCA, cleanup site. And just a preemptive apology, my coworker Ben Howard, who's the project manager on this, was planning to present this today. He got really sick with the flu, and he was going to try to do it. And I said, no, go home. Please don't expose everybody, and don't get sick up here. So I'll try to do my best. I do work on this project. I know it, but Ben definitely knows the technical elements a little bit better. So if you have any questions, I can't address them. We will definitely get back to you, but I think we can get through it. So the I&J Waterway cleanup site is shown here highlighted in the yellow. As I've talked about at other presentations, the Department of Ecology doesn't necessarily have sites that follow boundaries of property boundaries or that sort of thing. They determine where the site is based on where contamination has come to be present. So based on investigations and all the work that builds up in an RIFS or a remedial investigation and feasibility study, that's what really defines the site. So the highlighted yellow there is the I&J Waterway site. So just a little way in background, obviously this area was historic tide flats, kind of like we just talked about, prior to dredging and filling in areas. In the early 1900s, there was some initial dredging that created a channel for industrial use. But then in 1965, the actual federal channel was authorized and dredged. And in 1992, there was some maintenance dredging that was done by the by the Army Corps of Engineers as well. The early dredging created the southern upland area adjacent to the waterway where Bornstein's is at, where Bitter End Boat Works and all that southern shoreline, that was all created by the initial dredging. And then the inner Squalicum Harbor marina dredging that occurred in the 80s then created the northern upland area adjacent to the waterway, which is where the Bellwether Peninsula is at right now. And this image kind of shows that. You can see on the southern side there, at the bottom of the photo, Bornstein's and Bitter End Boat Works and some other industrial operations. But then on the northern side, that was underway. That's where the marina was actually under construction, and the Bellwether Peninsula just had the breakwater around that area, and the upland fill had not been placed there yet. But prior to 1944, there was a large lumber mill that was located in and around that area. In 1994, the port acquired the property, the upland property, and tenants have included lumber companies, olivine rock processing companies, seafood processors, as well as boat yards and other operators. The in-water portion of the site is owned by the state of Washington and managed by the Department of Natural Resources. And then, of course, there's the federal navigation channel that makes up the core portion of the I&J Waterway. And it is a MODCA site. It's been a listed site based on those historic operations. In 2005, the port entered into an agreed order to perform an RIFS, which is the document that defines what's there, where contamination is at, what's being exposed to that contamination, and that's the RI. And then the feasibility study says, okay, what are the engineering fixes that we can do? What are our options to address that contamination? And the agreed order was amended in 2012 to address some ongoing work, and then in 2015, the Department of Ecology approved the final RIFS document. And that's kind of the milestone document that highlights all of that work and then presents a preferred alternative. The RI defined the site and identified the contaminants, which are primarily PAHs, or polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, phthalates, phenols, and nickel. So those are the main contaminants that we're addressing as part of this site. Then they're mostly all sediment contamination. And this is just an image. You don't have to see the details here, but just trying to illustrate what the Department of Ecology looks at. This is a conceptual site model that really is an illustration in cross-section that shows kind of where all the contamination is, how things are moving around in the sediment, what the operational considerations are, what exposure pathways there are. And they use this as one of the tools that then defines the site and how you can move forward with a cleanup decision.
Can I get a copy of that?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, that is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. No, those conceptual models are really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And you would, if you could.
Really cool. Yeah.
So based on that work, the Department of Ecology then develops a cleanup action plan, and that's the final decision document. That takes all of the work that was done in the RIFS phase and says, okay, here's the cleanup. Here's what we're going to do. It's still high level. It's not engineered out yet, but it just says, okay, all the options have been evaluated. Here's the one we're going to go with. And the cleanup plan for the I&J waterway includes, for the entire site, it includes dredging about 18,000 cubic yards of sediment. That also then requires the demolition and replacement of the Bornstein dock as well as the bulkhead that's behind there. It'll cap a little under an acre of sediment that is to isolate the contamination that's in the sediment there. There's about a little over an acre of monitored natural recovery, which is where the natural sedimentation from the Nooksack and in Bellingham Bay buries contaminated sediments in place. And then, of course, there's ongoing monitoring and institutional controls that prevents disturbance of the caps and that sort of thing.
And the current plan for the 1,800 cubic yards is all?
Yeah, that would be, typically what we would do is dredge that and then take it to an upland disposal facility. So this shows then in the map view, there's 2 sediment cleanup units, or SCUs. I'll go over these in a little more detail, but this shows what the cleanup is selected by the Department of Ecology for the cleanup action plan. And the yellow area, that's the dredging. That's the area that will be dredged. The dock and bulkhead will be removed and replaced. And then that will be dredged to the depth of the federal navigation channel. The areas in pink, purple, that's the area of natural recovery. That's where natural sedimentation will occur and bury contaminants in place. The area in blue is it's called an enhanced natural recovery. It's where we actually will put down a thin layer of sand or sediment that kind of kickstarts that natural sedimentation process. All of these things are determined based on modeling and wave modeling and the way that conceptual site model that shows how things move around. And that's an area that gets a little higher energy environment, so they wanted to kind of kickstart that natural sedimentation a little bit faster. And then the green at the head of the waterway, that's a more high energy environment. There's more wave action, and so that's the area that would be capped in place.
Will you be adding bio or anything to the south?
Not
unit,
currently. That may be something that you could evaluate. These types of contaminants typically wouldn't use that. It's more for isolation rather than a treatment. But it's something that when you get into the detailed design, maybe something that you could still add to it, because it wouldn't really change. You could add to it, but it's not a wholesale change.
Key point there is it's isolation, not treatment.
Yeah, right. So now we're at that phase where the Department of Ecology has made that cleanup action determination, and we're entering into an agreed order to perform the next phase of work. So this is an agreed order with Ecology. That's the legal document that says, okay, here's what you're agreeing to do. The Port and Bornsteins have agreed to be signatories to that pending commission approval. And it's really focused on remedial design and engineering for only one of those sediment management units or cleanup units, which I'll talk about here in a moment again. And the scope of work includes the design investigation, the development of an engineering and design report, and then detailed engineering and designs, making it essentially shovel-ready project that's ready for construction. So this scope of work is really just to go from the conceptual model to a real project that's engineered and designed and ready to bid, but it doesn't cover the construction at this point. And just to go back to this one, this is the area that we're focused on for this agreed order, which is the sediment cleanup unit 1, which is the dredging area. There's a couple of reasons for that. The Department of Ecology wanted us to pursue this way, really because this is a pretty straightforward project. It's fairly complicated in the sense that you have a dock and a bulkhead that you'd have to remove and replace, but we do that work pretty regularly, in the marine infrastructure. And but it's just a dredging project. So there's not a lot of design of the cap. There's not a lot of working on the shoreline areas as far as how to make sure you have a stable system. It's a fairly easy one to permit as well. So the Department of Ecology requested that we break this up into these 2 units and pursue this one first, which also addresses, a good chunk of the area that we're getting contaminated sediment out of. So with that in mind, the next steps would be that we would enter into this agreed order, issue it for public review and comment. That has already been scheduled in the anticipation that the Bornsteins and the Port Commission would approve this. We also have scheduled a February 23rd walking tour of the site. That's being managed by the Ecology as well as resources, the local resources for sustainable strategies communities. They're going to help lead those tours, and it's on a Saturday, so we can get as many people out there as possible. And then we will also make a SEPA determination in parallel with this, which has its own public comment period. With that process in mind, then we will go out for consultant selection and hire the engineering firm to actually start working on this, with the anticipation that the cleanup design would be completed at the end of 2019, early 2020. There's a fair amount to do there with structural work and making sure that we have the design and engineering of that bulkhead and dock replacement really dialed in. And then we would pursue a consent decree to actually implement the cleanup in a future phase pending grant funding availability. So with that in mind, I'd be happy to address any questions that I can.
Commissioner Shepherd?
Sure. Back to the public comment portion. What are, between March 19th and 20th, how do folks get access to make those public comments? Do you
Yeah,
have a
so the
link on
Department of
website?
Ecology leads that. They've prepared a fact sheet and some public outreach materials. Their local office here manages that. They do a really good job of getting the word out. They're waiting, of course, for commission decision on this action, and then they'll launch that. Really, I think anticipation that those postcards and information would go out as early as next week.
Yeah, those, I think many of us have seen those postcards come, and there's usually a web link as well
Yeah.
that will accompany it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. How long do we expect that dock to be out of commission, and what's that going to do for our tenant?
Well, we haven't gotten to that point yet. It could be a similar scenario, like with the Harris Avenue Shipyard, where we were able to keep them operational while doing one section and then maybe doing another section. That might be something that could be done here. It's a totally different layout, but it could be done. We have actually already met with Bornsteins on operational issues with that specific question in mind, whether there's a seasonal approach where they use the dock more or less. And off the bat, it sounds like that's something that they would be, we'd be able to work with them on to make it as minimal impact as possible. The one caveat to that is that some of that work is limited to seasonal work that you can do only when certain fish windows are open that the agencies allow you to do in-water work. So we'd be constrained to those, but we could look at some kind of phasing approach potentially if we needed to.
Great. Okay, and I'd just like to thank Bornsteins for being a good partner with
Yep.
us on this. We're really pleased to be working with them and getting this project moving along. We couldn't do it without them, and we're pleased to have them on board here.
Yep.
Commissioner Bell?
My comments are similar to the last one. What an amazing thing this is, too, for the amount of time you've put into this. So my comment back to you is what an amazing job you do at negotiating some very difficult things over a long period of time. Your patience is incredible. I don't have those kind of patience. But for those who don't know, this was an amazing, long journey to get to this point with a lot of diplomacy. And I applaud you for that effort and your ability to get this closed. So thank you for that, and I'm anxious to get this underway. So thanks.
Great. Yeah, this is a big milestone to get to this stage and keep it moving.
question.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank Bornsteins for coming forward and working with us, being, as Commissioner Shepherd said, good partners on this, because we certainly want the best outcome for them and the best outcome for the people of Whatcom County that own the waterfront. So together, I think we can make everything work. Maybe one piece of food for thought for you and your discussions about what to do with unloading is dependent upon the time of the year, usually from 1st of November to spring. Trident Seafood's docks over here with the cranes and that are available, and they could truck fish over, tote fish over from the handful of boats that they have come in. So it's because I know that when you take that dock away, that's going to be hurtful. And I don't know if when you're doing the bulkhead and the dock, if we can get away with doing a partial.
Right.
So maybe we have availability in the cold storage area over here to unload boats. We've got hoists up the west side of the pier, south side of the pier, and the stuff on the south side of the pier is not used most of the winter.
Okay. Yeah, that's the season where we'd be working in the in-water, so that's really good to know.
Yeah, so just maybe we can talk with Trident, and we're pretty good partners with them, and we can help Bornsteins get something worked out to where there's not a big cost factor involved, and we can shuffle stuff right out of that gate right over. like you used to.
The really nice thing is that they're project partners on this, and we're working on it together, and we've already had a number of meetings with them just in the past week, just to start really working in detail on these exact issues. So having them at the table for those discussions is critical, because
Right.
staff could maybe have the greatest idea, but then it doesn't work with their operations, and that doesn't get you very far at all once you go to actually try to do it and you realize you're messing up their operations. So no, that's a great idea, and we'll have them at the table for all those discussions.
One question I have is, on the pecking order of the MOTCA list, where are we with the I&J?
Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, the governor's budget didn't have a significant amount of funding for Bellingham Bay projects. The Department of Ecology had requested funding for all of our projects. The beauty of this one, though, is that we are at the stage that we have a significant or sufficient funding to get us through this phase of work, where we can do the engineering and design work, and then really have a shovel-ready project. Those are some of the elements that kicks it up to the top of the list when you have something that's really ready to be done and permitted, because that is commonly where the hiccup comes in, is where you could front-load a project like this, especially a sediment project where you have federal permits and other things, and then you get into the permitting phase and it just sort of slows way down for whatever reason. And then that money just kind of sits there, and they say, hey, why isn't Bellingham spending that money? Whereas we can use the funding we have to get to engineering through permitting, and then have a real project that we can say, fund it and it'll get built next year. And that really puts it at the top of the list. So we've seen that on a few of our projects. And ecology and the legislature are starting to see those projects that way. So that's the model that we're using, and that's actually why we've structured this agreed order the way it is.
I had one more question, Brian, and it had to do with the dredging sediments. We've had talks about what to do with the ASB pond and so on and so forth. Would these sediments fit in with what we want to do, or what maybe we would propose to do over there? Would this be a disposal site for that stuff?
Potentially, yeah. There's some hurdles to go through that, but that's part of the things that we're going to start based on, your direction of the last meeting was to start looking at that and having these types of projects potentially being utilizing that facility is definitely on the list, because it could save a fair amount of funding resources for the port as well as for the state. If they're funding half the project, you can have cost savings. Then that saves the MOTCA money that can go to another community or another project that needs to get done. So that's definitely on the table.
Yeah, well, what comes to mind to me is if you were to use a pump dredge, where they dredge and they pump it up the pipe, you can put the pipe right across the land, right into the pond there. Number one, we get rid of all the truck exhaust going into the air, truck traffic, and lower the cost considerably.
Yeah, and those are the exact kind of things we'll hire a consultant on that just has, they'll look at the characteristics of the sediment. Is that the kind of dredging you can do with that kind of sediment? Some is a little more clayey. It kind of needs a dredger, needs teeth on the bucket. Right. Some stuff's really easy to do with that kind of system. So those are all on the table.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
My only comment to that is if you could give us a balance to how many cubic yards can you put in that ASB pond before that whole ASB pond becomes a disposal site?
Right.
So 1,800 cubic yards is going to take a good chunk of fill.
18,000.
18,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to take a good chunk.
Right,
And so
that's
we don't
why I
want
asked
to fill the whole thing up. We don't want to fill half of it up. But at some point, we've got a judgment call to make as to when does that become unusable because we put so much. The intent isn't to create a disposal site.
Right.
The intent is to create some usable land. So
Right.
there will be a balance between how much we throw in there and how much, and we don't have enough information now to make that call.
Yeah, that's right.
So I would ask for some information so that we can make a
Yeah,
judgment
and
call.
I was speaking to the behind the wall part. I wasn't speaking to the whole thing.
Yeah.
So.
Although
I have no intentions of wanting to use it for a disposal site. I just thought if everything fits in the one spot, it'd be a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
But if it,
Our
doesn't
preliminary
work,
look does look like it could handle a fair amount of capacity, actually, though.
And what is that?
Yeah,
So-
I don't know.
so
Yeah,
we
so
know.
that's that next level of detail for sure. Yeah.
Lots.
Lots.
And I think when we're weighing those decisions, it's important for us to just be clearly communicating what is the cost-benefit analysis for the public here. What are they seeing in terms of the cost difference? What is the environmental change in terms of all the time and pollution and dump it in somebody else's backyard versus securely taking care of it here.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's already in line with some other plans we have in the works, so. And I'm confident you'll do that, so thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay.
Thanks.
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute an agreed order to perform remedial design for the required cleanup actions at the INJ Waterway site, pending no substantive changes to the draft agreed order.
Commissioner Bell.
Yes.
Commissioner Shepherd.
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe's yes, 3-0.
Thank you, Commissioners.
I know you were. I wasn't turning quick enough, though. Other business. Commissioner Bell.
No, I'm waiting for the presentation.
Mr. Shepherd.
I'm excited to hear what Don has to say.
Okay, so Don, would you enlighten us?
I don't know if I can do that, but I'll give my best shot at it. Don Goldberg, Director of Economic Development, with my third cold of the season.
Don't speak into the mic too hard, push it all the way over here, please.
Exactly. So the reason I'm here addressing you today is it's actually a year since my first time that I addressed you as a commission, talking about some of the plans that I had and some of the ways and the things that we would do to carry out those plans. And so I'm here to give you a brief description of going back, what we've done and who's done it and where we're heading. So the first thing is we've talked about rebranding us, the port, and others. And so we're considering branding ourselves REP, which would be Regional Economic Partnership. We're trying to do something that really enhances the fact that we can't do this on our own and that we are a county-wide organization and partnerships are extremely important. So we're looking at that. We haven't made a final decision as of yet. So some of the things that I discussed my first time when I addressed you were listening to the community, asking plenty of questions, challenging the norm, building a team of professionals, becoming part of this community through forming and strengthening partnerships. And as many of you know, I'm on a lot of boards and committees, emphasizing that we are county-wide, being more available to the small cities, and thinking about a county-wide strategy. So that was what I had proposed that my vision was for this division. And it's with great pleasure that I can report that we've been very successful in building and implementing our foundational work, and that we now will be spending the majority of this coming year on our efforts on implementation and, most important, deliverables. So the team is what it's all about, and I'm proud to say that we have finished building our team for the time being. There is a total of 4 FTEs. Myself, John Mitchner, who is a project manager, Gina Stark, who was just promoted to a project manager, and our new hire, Jennifer Novick, who is our research and communications coordinator. I thought I'd go over a few highlights of what each one of these FTEs are doing. So John, who brings the most knowledge and who's been a team member the longest and has the most contacts and experience, has been very important to me for introductions, follow through, reporting to Commerce, keeping our team moving forward as I do my work. He's currently working with a large number of U.S. and Canadian firms to either expand their operations here or actually bring them into the Whatcom County region. And he and I have worked on a number of these, and there are 3 or 4 of them that are actually within striking of occurring. And most important, of course, these all equate to more jobs. He's worked locally lately with our Marine Division, helping them with foreign trade zone opportunity down at the waterfront. He's working on a number of revolving loans that support small businesses. He's part of the International Mobility Trade Corridor with our partners in Canada, and he manages our state commerce portfolio and relationship. Gina, who many of you have met, Gina's been with us about 7 or 8 months. A couple of months ago, she was promoted to project manager, and Gina is leading our whole rural broadband program. And that is an enormous responsibility on its own, and she's really, really taken this on. She did not have formal broadband background, and the reason she's not here today is she's actually been working all day with our partners from other ports on deliverables and driving the entire county. She also was the key person on getting us our CURB grant for our rural broadband study. She's working as a key person with Housing Alliance with Sustainable Connections on dealing with affordable housing. She also worked with staff members here to successfully get a $750,000 recently awarded grant for housing. She's also leading our countywide opportunity zone rollout, and she was the lead author on the white paper 2019 that I forwarded to you on Monday. So Gina's really working out, and she's a very hard worker, and we're very proud to have her. And then Jennifer, our newest member. Jennifer is a PhD researcher. She's extremely organized, very intelligent, has really brought another dimension to the group. Right now, she's implementing and creating a county-wide economic development brochure. That's something I have talked about since I began. I was hoping it would happen quicker. It didn't. Probably for the best, because she put a very powerful RFP out. We've now gone to contract with our consultant, and that brochure, it will be both print and digital. And the purpose of the brochure is to weave our differences as a very diverse community into a strong regional economic development message, so that anybody, when they go to any part of the county, they will get the same message, but the message will come from each area. So, for instance, Linden will write their own message in the digital and print format as to why you should come to Linden for business. So our job is to weave this all together so it has a message for the whole region, but we want each place to celebrate what it brings to the party. So my first day before I interviewed, I went to our office, the chamber, the city, the county's offices, and I asked them for economic development material, and nobody had it. And most of the people didn't even know what economic development was. So that was a loud message to me, and I thought it was really important that we are consistent with the message we tell. So Jennifer is working on that, and that should be completed by March. She's assisting me with the County Business and Commerce Committee. She's writing white papers on, right now, housing. She's using research skills, implementing examples from all over the country, things that have worked and things that haven't, so that we can report back to the Business and Commerce Committee. We'll be doing about 5 topics. We're going to be sending a doodle poll out to Commerce this week to see the other 4 topics that are most important to them. She'll also be leading the efforts on the I-5 corridor study for infrastructure for both industrial and housing. She'll be working with Gina on the county SEDS list, which is due in a week from now. And next year, our group will lead the new report on the area regional economic study. And then she will be implementing something new. She'll be implementing a quarterly newsletter on economic development for the entire county. And then there's me, and I can't, when I was writing this, I couldn't think of what I do. It was like somebody saying, where do you want to eat? And I was anywhere, but I can't think of a restaurant's name. And so it was really difficult because as most of you know, I'm pretty much all over the place. But some of the important things that I'm working on right now is creating a really clear, sustainable regional economy vision. Of course, we've talked about Cherry Point. I'm working hard with Heartland on updating the Cherry Point study, as well as working with the ownerships in Cherry Point. I'm continuing to work with the city of Blaine on helping them deal with the lack of doctors up there and medical needs, along with some other opportunities that Blaine's coming to. I'm leading the effort with the County Business and Commerce Committee. I lead the Team Whatcom group. I'm working very closely with public-private non-partnerships right now, supporting my team, which I'm incredibly proud of, and pretty much everything in between. I'm working on a couple of build-to-suit opportunities at the airport, as well as some other build-to-suits countywide. So a lot of things going on. What we're going to focus on as we move forward is jobs, infrastructure, coordination of stakeholders, implementation of rural broadband program, bringing Cherry Point back into the discussion for good jobs, working with Harcourt to bring higher paying opportunities to waterfront, and much, much more. So that's where we stand. I'd love to answer any questions if you guys have.
Commissioner Shepard.
Don, who takes lead on the small cities coordination for those meetings and their activities?
I do.
You do. Are you going to continue doing that?
I plan on, yeah.
Okay. All right. And are those small cities each, you mentioned they're partnering on that brochure that Jennifer is putting together. Do they all collaborate on a common web platform, or is that all divergent and separate?
So the goal is to unite us as a region, but to celebrate everybody for what they are. So when we come together at those meetings, typically, which initially I have to say I was maybe a little intimidated by those meetings the first time, and they're one of my favorite meetings. I think we get a lot done there. I thought that there might be more pushback, but I find the group to be very inviting, and I think they're really starting to depend on us. And so the brochure, we've asked each individual mayor to have themselves or their staff write a 150-word composition for the print document on who they are and why somebody should move their business there. And then they'll have much more room in the digital format. And then we'll coordinate the small cities to all have their own say for each individual city. Then there'll be a county part to that brochure, a city of Bellingham, and a port.
Okay, well, it's one of the groups I haven't yet been to, so it's been on my list of trying to make it to. I'm going to prioritize it to get to their next one.
So they occur the third Tuesday of every month from 9 to 11 in City Hall of Linden.
Third Tuesday. Okay, I see you send those out to us, so I will look for the next one.
I do spend some time writing agendas.
Yes. Thank you. That's all of my question for now.
Commissioner Bell?
I can't possibly tell you how quickly you got up to speed and how impressed I am with your knowledge of this county. I've been here for 30 years or so, and you know more about more properties and more people than I could possibly imagine. What an amazing deep dive you've done into Whatcom County. I now take great comfort in knowing that if I've got a question about any piece of property or anybody, you know them. You know them better than I do.
Used to have a hairline.
You're now making, you can now make introductions to me. So on that note, job well done. And the only thing I didn't hear in that presentation was something that I think you've been marvelous at, and that is rebranding Cherry Point and where you're headed with that. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about where that's going to go, and I don't necessarily need it today, but I just know that your effort there has been an amazing thought process, something we didn't even consider at some level about how we could take Cherry Point and turn it into a good asset for us. And so I think the county is well served by your presence here. I would also ask that you give this presentation to the county council and the city councils so that they see exactly what everybody does. We can put those questions to bed about what does my staff do and during the day and what value have we brought for the money that we're asking for. If you haven't already done that, I would imagine you've already done that.
Well, I've given them all presentations, but I've not done a rollout of what everybody, the staff is doing and how busy we are. And that just touches a little of what we're really implementing.
Yeah, and I've seen the value in this, so I'm a fan. So giving that presentation to the county and giving that to other people who may be ignorant of what role you play in this, I would encourage that. By that same token, I mean, I just watched you do a presentation for a chocolate thing up in Blaine, and you knew more about the company and the people behind it and the realtors and the property managers than I could have even imagined. So well done. That's my only comment. And then at some point, let's talk about Cherry Point and where we can go with that.
Okay.
Well, Don, thank you. I asked for the little update here today, and it's very good. 2 years ago, we had a big void here in the Economic Development Department of our area at the Port of Bellingham, and we spoke to our executive director about it. And I'd have to say, I think our executive director made the best choice he could have made. I think you're doing a heck of a job, and the presentation you have given does need to be handed out in other areas in this county so that people understand that we are moving forward. We are going to be an economic developer for this county, and you and your team appears to me are going to do a very, very good job. And I thank you for that, and I thank you for your hard work, and I hope your hairline comes back a little bit for you. So.
Well, I really have felt tremendous support by all of you, as well as the majority of the community. I couldn't have asked for anything more.
Which brings me to my final question. Is there anything this commission can do to help you or expedite anything you're doing?
No, I appreciate all of your support, and as things come up, we'll bring them to you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Don.
How did you not crack a smile during all of that? We just heaped you with praises, and you kept this.
It's the environment here.
When
It's
you go
kinda
back out,
formal.
The hairline's too tight.
Exactly. I'm supposed to say the praises are for the team,
They are.
which
good team.
I'm really proud of our team. We're going to do some big things.
Good.
Thank you.
Good hires all around. I like working with these folks, so, yeah.
Mr. Shepherd, any other business?
I don't have any today.
I have
Mr.
none.
Bell? I have a couple of things. One, we got in a pinch here not too long ago, and we needed a little bit of help, and we had a lady that retired, and our executive director made a call, and she responded. And we would like to thank her for that. And it's been a big help, Sylvia. We know you're going to be leaving again soon, and want to thank you from the commission and everybody here. Thanks for coming and helping us.
And I'm taking that as a personal challenge to bring her out of retirement for a second time.
You might be putting the gloves on with red.
I just want to caution you on what happened to Brett Favre when he decided to come out of retirement for the second time. So keep that in mind. And don't think you're getting another retirement party. Just,
Okay, I have one other thing. This morning, All-American Marine once again came through, and they launched another new vessel called the Waterman. And it's a hybrid passenger vessel to be used down in, I think it's Pierce County.
County.
Yeah. So kudos to those guys. Once again, it's a really nice-looking rig, and it's a step into the future as a hybrid passenger vessel.
If I can tag on to that, Commissioner Briscoe is always thanking staff, and the All-American Marine Project was a tremendous success. For those that aren't familiar with it, we moved a business that was in Fairhaven and out of space into a location here on the I&J Waterway where they've got much more space. They're able to launch their vessels on our existing boat launch. They've hired more employees, and this was done because of port staff work, county participation with their EDI funds, city participation with permits, et cetera. But today, excuse me, we've got to have a big thank you to Commissioner Briscoe, because while I was driving to work and noticing the temperature in my car was 12 degrees outside and I've got my seat heater on, Commissioner Briscoe was in a skiff pulling that launch vessel around to the Whatcom Waterway where it's going to be fit out. And not only is Commissioner Briscoe in there, but he has his wife in there with him. There's no way my wife is getting into a waterborne vessel at 12 degrees outside. Carol is a saint.
He is a good girl.
Commissioner Briscoe deserves a big round of applause for his help there this morning in really weird conditions.
Just doing our part for the county, but thank you. I have no other business, so with that being said,
Public comment.
oh, we have public comment. We got one more public comment. Do we have any more? Oh, Jim? Sorry, I almost missed that.
Jim Kyle, Vice President of the Working Waterfront Coalition. It's not every Port Commission meeting that makes me want to stand up and say kumbaya at the end, but this has been incredibly positive. And in following that lead, I'd like to comment about the intergovernmental framework agreement with Lummi Nation. This has flown under the radar screen for good reasons, and it's not well known in the public what's been happening here and what's happening now. But it's huge. It's really huge. And Commissioner Briscoe and I both were fishing for salmon commercially in 1974 when the Bolt decision threw our industry into extreme tumult. And we've seen history unfold since that time. We've arrived at another point in this history that's extremely positive and compared to what we experienced in 1974, which was unfortunate for all parties. But this agreement not only enables the port to proceed with a number of things that will aid the citizens of the county, create jobs. But I think, looking back, there were people at the time the Bolt decision hit that said, well, just remember in the long run, you're going to see this as a positive if you're concerned about conserving salmon on Puget Sound. Now, we haven't advanced during that time, but we're at a stage here that there are some serious problems with our salmon populations. And without the impact of Lummi Nation and the other tribes on the political process, I think we would be in much worse shape. So hopefully using that influence, I know it's not always easy. A treaty has the same legal standing as the Constitution of the United States. So, but this is so positive to have this agreement in place and be prepared to work through details on the projects. And we look forward to enjoying the influence of the Lummi Nation on our habitat, which we're all concerned about. So thanks very much for this work, especially Brian and the staff and the commission for supporting it. Thank you very much.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Has public comment to make? Meeting adjourned. Thanks.